The desert wind carried no mercy at 2:30 in the morning. It screamed across the flatlands of Fort Carson, Colorado, cutting through the darkness like a blade through silk. The perimeter fence stood 15 feet high, crowned with razor wire that gleamed under the pale moonlight. Behind it, the most secure military installation in the western United States slept with one eye open. Alexis Blackwood moved through the shadows like smoke. 26 years old, lean and precise, she wore black tactical pants and a dark jacket that had seen better days. Her boots made no sound against the hard-packed earth. She carried nothing but a small backpack and a certainty that had taken 7 years to forge. She stopped 30 yards from Sector 7, the section where patrol routes overlapped for exactly 90 seconds every hour, the section she had been studying through satellite footage for 3 months, the section that would get her exactly what she needed. Captured, the thermal camera picked her up first, a heat signature moving with purpose toward the fence. In the security booth, Specialist Marcus Webb leaned forward, his coffee forgotten. He keyed his radio with practiced efficiency. Sierra 7, this is Overwatch. Single individual approaching fence line Sector 7. Moving with intent. The response came back immediately. Overwatch Sierra 7. Visual confirmed. Deploying intercept team. Colonel Nathaniel Hartley was 3 miles away when the call came through. 58 years old, with silver threading through hair that had once been jet black, he carried himself with the kind of bearing that only came from 3.5 decades of military service. The scar along his jawline was a souvenir from Fallujah. The limp in his left leg was courtesy of a helicopter crash in Afghanistan. The weight in his eyes came from watching too many good people die for reasons that made less sense every year. He had been reviewing personnel files when his radio crackled to life. An intruder at 0230 at Fort Carson, where intruders simply did not exist. All units maintain positions. I'm en route. His voice carried the kind of authority that made grown men straighten their spines. By the time he arrived, 8 soldiers had formed a perimeter around the woman. She stood perfectly still, in the center of their circle, hands raised high, palms open. The floodlights painted everything in harsh white reality. Hartley stepped out of his vehicle, studying her with the eye of a man who had seen every kind of trouble the world had to offer. She was young, too young for the kind of calm she was displaying. Most people caught infiltrating a military base showed fear, panic, desperation. This woman showed nothing but patience, like she had been expecting this, like this was exactly what she wanted. On your knees, one of the soldiers ordered. Hands behind your head. She complied without hesitation. Smooth, professional. The movements of someone who had done this before. Hartley approached slowly, his eyes scanning for weapons, for threats, for anything that might explain this madness. You picked the wrong place to trespass, ma'am. She looked up at him then. Her eyes were green sharp as broken glass, and they held something he could not quite identify. Recognition, maybe, or calculation. Did I? She asked quietly. 2 words, but they carried weight that made Hartley pause. They zip-tied her wrists and escorted her to the temporary holding facility near the airstrip. The room smelled of disinfectant and recycled air. Concrete walls, metal table, 2 chairs. The standard setup for questioning someone who did not belong. They searched her backpack first. 1 USB drive, a folded map of Fort Carson with Sector 7 circled in red, and a photograph creased and faded with age. Hartley picked up the photograph. His breath caught. It showed 7 people in tactical gear standing in front of a nondescript building. The photo was dated June 1998, 27 years ago. And their third from the left was a younger version of Nathaniel Hartley. 31 years old, fresh-faced, wearing the insignia of a classified program that officially did not exist. Project Sentinel. Where did you get this? His voice had gone very quiet. My father, she said. The search continued. They found nothing else of interest until one of the female soldiers noticed something during the standard security check. A mark on the woman's skin, small, precise, located at the base of her neck, just below the hairline, where it could be hidden by clothing or long hair. The soldier called Hartley over. He leaned in, studying the marking under the harsh fluorescent lights. It was a tattoo, barely larger than a quarter. The design showed a stylized hawk and flight wings, spread talons extended. Beneath it, rendered in numbers so small they were almost invisible, was a code, PS 047. Hartley felt the world tilt slightly on its axis. He had seen this marking once before. Only once. In a briefing room that no longer existed for a program that had been buried in classified files so deep that even mentioning its name could end careers. Project Sentinel had been a ghost program. Established in 1983, during the height of the Cold War, it had recruited and trained operatives for missions that required absolute deniability. The tattoos were identification, a way to verify identity when everything else could be faked, forged, or falsified. Each operative received a unique code. The tattoo was placed with surgical precision, using ink that contained microscopic tracers detectable only under specific wavelengths of light. The program had officially ended in 1992 when the Soviet Union collapsed. Unofficially, Hartley knew it had been reactivated sometime in the mid-2010s. He knew because he had been asked to consult on the reactivation. He had declined. He was too old for that kind of work by then, too aware of how these things usually ended. But someone with code PS 047 should not exist, should not be here, should not be alive. He dismissed everyone from the room, except two trusted sergeants. Then he pulled up a chair and sat across from the woman. The fluorescent lights hummed above them. Outside, the distant sound of a helicopter lifting off drifted through the walls. What's your name? Hartley asked. Emma Collins, she said, according to my ID. And your real name? She held his gaze for 3 long seconds, measuring him, calculating odds, making a decision that would change everything. Alexis Blackwood. The name hit Hartley like a punch to the sternum. His mind raced backward, through files, through briefings, through classified reports he had read years ago. Alexis Blackwood. Status KIA. Killed in action. Syria 2018. Operation Nightfall. You're dead, he said flatly. A file says I'm dead, she corrected. There's a difference. Hartley leaned back his mind, working through implications that spread out like cracks in ice. If she was alive, if she was here, then someone had made a catastrophic mistake. Or worse, someone had made a very deliberate choice. Why are you here? He asked. Because I need you to remember something, Colonel. Operation Nightfall, Damascus, 7 years ago. Hartley's jaw tightened. He remembered. Everyone who had clearance remembered. It had been a disaster. A mission that went wrong in every possible way. 7 operatives sent to destroy a chemical weapons facility outside Damascus. Intelligence suggested 4 survivors initially, but the official report listed all 7 as KIA. You were part of that team, he said slowly. I was 19 years old, Alexis said, youngest operative they had ever recruited for Sentinel. I was on that team because my father had been part of the original program back in the 80s. They thought genetics might matter, thought maybe whatever made him good at this work had passed down to me. She paused, her eyes distant. They were right. I was good at it. Too good, maybe. Good enough to survive when everyone else died. Hartley stood and walked to the small window that looked out over the airstrip. Dawn was still 2 hours away. The world outside was dark and quiet, holding its breath. The official report says, "The official report is a lie." Alexis cut him off. Damascus was a setup. We walked into a kill zone. Someone fed our coordinates to the enemy. Someone wanted that team dead. That's a serious accusation. I have proof. Hartley turned back to face her. Then why didn't you come forward 7 years ago? Because I would have died within 24 hours. Her voice was absolutely certain. Whoever set up Damascus had the power to make operatives disappear, had the resources to alter records, forge documents, create entire false narratives. Coming forward would have just meant a second funeral. This time, a real one. She leaned forward, her zip-tied hands resting on the metal table. So I did what I was trained to do. I disappeared. I became a ghost. And for 7 years, I hunted for the truth. Hartley studied her face. He had interrogated hundreds of people over his career. He knew the tells, the micro-expressions that gave away lies, the shifts in tone that indicated deception. He saw none of them. "What did you find?" he asked quietly. 17 operations, Alexis said, across 15 years, all classified, all marked as successes or acceptable losses, 52 operatives and soldiers killed. Except they were not acceptable losses, Colonel. They were murders, planned, executed, covered up. She held his gaze. Damascus was not the first, and if I had not survived, it would not have been the last. Hartley felt something cold settle in his chest. He had been in the military long enough to know that terrible things happened in the shadows, that sometimes good people died for reasons that had nothing to do with duty or honor or protecting the nation. But this was something else entirely. "You have proof of this," he said. "Not a question. 40% of it. The rest is in a safety deposit box in Arlington, Virginia. I need your help getting there." "Why me?" Alexis smiled then. It was a sad expression, tinged with something that looked like hope. "Because you served with my father. Major Daniel Blackwood, Gulf War 1991. You told him that Project Sentinel would protect its operatives like family, that no one would be left behind. He believed you, Colonel. He trusted that promise right up until the moment someone put a bullet in his back and called it friendly fire." Hartley felt the floor drop out from under him. Daniel Blackwood. He remembered the name, remembered the man. Tall, quiet, brilliant with codes and communications. They had worked together for 6 months in 91, and then Daniel had died in a firefight in Kuwait. Friendly fire. A tragic accident in the fog of war. Except Hartley was looking at Daniel's daughter, and she was telling him it had been murder. "Your father," he said slowly. "I was told—" "I know what you were told," Alexis interrupted. "The same story everyone was told. But my father kept journals, encrypted, detailed. My mother gave them to me when I turned 16. He knew something was wrong, knew there was corruption in the program. He was going to report it. And 3 days before he could, he died." She leaned back, chains rattling softly. "I joined Sentinel at 18 years old for one reason, Colonel. To find out who killed my father. Damascus gave me the answer, and it is bigger than you can imagine." Hartley's mind was racing now, calculating, analyzing. If what she was saying was true, if even half of it was true, then he was staring at a conspiracy that stretched back decades. That had cost dozens of lives. That was still active. His radio crackled. "Colonel Hartley, you have an incoming call from Langley. Director Vaughn wants a secure line brief about the prisoner." Hartley's blood went cold. Director Cornelius Vaughn. The man was a legend. A Cold War veteran who had helped dismantle the Soviet intelligence network, who had run operations in places that did not officially exist, who had trained an entire generation of CIA operatives, including Hartley himself back in 1987. Cornelius Vaughn was Hartley's mentor, his inspiration, for joining the intelligence community, the man he had modeled his entire career after. And Alexis Blackwood was looking at him with eyes that said she knew exactly what that radio call meant. "The facility's facial recognition system," she said softly. "It scanned me when I was brought in. The system is networked with Langley. They know I'm here. They know I'm alive." "They," Hartley repeated. "Director Vaughn and everyone working for him." Alexis's voice was steady. "He is the one who set up Damascus. He is the one who killed my father. He has been running an arms trafficking network for 40 years using military operations as cover. Billions of dollars. Weapons sold to terrorists, to enemy states, to anyone who could pay. And anyone who discovered the truth ended up in a body bag with a flag draped over it." Hartley wanted to reject it, wanted to call it paranoid conspiracy theory. But he was looking at a woman who should be dead, wearing a tattoo that should not exist, telling him things that connected too many dots he had tried not to see over the years. "How long do we have?" he asked. The question was an acknowledgement, an acceptance, a choice. Alexis understood immediately. "If Vaughn knows I'm alive, we have maybe 18 hours before a cleanup team arrives. They will not arrest us, Colonel. They will eliminate us and make it look like an accident. A training mishap, equipment failure, whatever works. What do you need?" "I need to get to Arlington. I need the rest of the evidence, and then I need to make sure that the truth gets out before they can bury it again." Hartley stood. 35 years of service. A career built on following orders, maintaining the chain of command, trusting the system. Everything he had believed in was cracking apart. But he thought about Daniel Blackwood, about a man who had trusted the wrong people and paid with his life, about a daughter who had spent 7 years living in the shadows, chasing justice that everyone said did not exist. He thought about 52 names on a list, 52 families told their loved ones died serving their country, when the truth was they had been murdered by the very people sworn to protect them. He made his decision. "I have someone I trust," he said. "Lieutenant Catherine Sullivan. She has been with me for 6 years. If anyone can help us get out of here quietly, it is her. Are you sure you can trust her?" Hartley met Alexis's eyes. "I trust her with my life." "Then I hope you're right," Alexis said, "because we are about to bet both our lives on it." Hartley walked to the door, then paused and looked back. "Your father," he said quietly. "Daniel, he was a good man, one of the best I ever served with." "I know," Alexis replied. "That is why they killed him." Hartley nodded once and stepped out into the hallway. The facility hummed with its usual pre-dawn rhythm. Soldiers changing shifts, equipment being checked, the mundane routines of military life continuing, as if the world had not just fractured. He pulled out his phone and sent a coded text to Lieutenant Sullivan. 3 words that would mean nothing to anyone intercepting the message, but everything to her. "Phoenix Protocol, immediate." The response came back in 30 seconds. "Acknowledged, en route." Hartley walked toward his office, his mind already working through logistics. How to move a prisoner out of Fort Carson without triggering alarms. How to explain the absence of both himself and a high-value detainee. How to cover their tracks long enough to get to Arlington. Behind him, in the holding cell, Alexis Blackwood sat very still. She had set events in motion that could not be stopped. 7 years of preparation. 7 years of gathering evidence, building networks, creating dead drops, and backup plans. She thought about her father, about the journals he had left behind filled with observations about a system slowly rotting from the inside, about his certainty that something was fundamentally wrong with Project Sentinel, about his determination to fix it. They had killed him for that determination. She thought about Damascus, about watching her team die one by one, about the moment she realized they had been betrayed, about the choice she made to play dead, to let them think she had died with the others because survival meant she could expose the truth. She thought about the USB drive in her backpack holding 40% of the evidence she needed. Files stolen from secure servers, communications intercepted, financial records that traced weapons sales back to their source, names, dates, transactions. It was enough to raise questions. But the remaining 60% in Arlington was enough to destroy careers, topple empires, send people to prison for the rest of their lives. If she could reach it, if Director Vaughn did not reach her first. The door opened. Lieutenant Catherine Sullivan stepped inside. 34 years old, with auburn hair pulled back in a regulation bun, and eyes that missed very little. She had a folder under her arm, and the kind of expression that suggested she was trying to solve a complex problem. Colonel Hartley briefed me, she said without preamble. Prisoner transferred to federal detention facility in Denver. Paperwork is in process. How long? Alexis asked. 3 hours to finalize. Another hour to prep transport. We move at 0800. Alexis nodded. It was tight but workable, assuming Vaughn's people did not move faster than expected. Sullivan studied her for a long moment. I looked you up, she said finally. In the classified archives, Project Sentinel, Operation Nightfall. You are listed as KIA. I know what I'm listed as, so either you are a ghost or someone made a very big mistake. It was not a mistake. Sullivan nodded slowly. Colonel Hartley does not trust easily. If he is putting his career on the line for you, that means something. It means he is a better man than the people who betrayed my father, your father, Major Daniel Blackwood, Gulf War. He was murdered by the same people who tried to kill me in Damascus. Sullivan's expression did not change, but something flickered in her eyes. Recognition, maybe, or calculation. That is a serious accusation. I have proof. And if you are wrong, then I die, Alexis said simply. But the people who killed 52 soldiers and operatives walk free. Is that justice, Lieutenant? Sullivan held her gaze for 3 long seconds. Then she turned and walked toward the door. Transport leaves at 0800. Be ready. She paused at the threshold. For what it is worth, she said, without turning around. I hope you are right, because if you are telling the truth, then we are all in danger from the very people sworn to protect us. The door closed. Alexis was alone again, with her thoughts, and the weight of 7 years pressing down on her shoulders. Somewhere in Virginia, Director Cornelius Vaughn was staring at a computer screen displaying a facial recognition match. A woman who should not exist. A ghost from a mission he had personally orchestrated. A loose end he thought had been tied off 7 years ago in the Syrian desert. He picked up his secure phone and made 3 calls, each one brief, each one ending with the same instruction. No witnesses, no evidence. Make it clean. By the time the sun rose over Fort Carson, pieces were moving on a board that spanned the entire continental United States. A game that had been playing for 40 years. A game where the stakes were measured in billions of dollars and human lives. And at the center of it all was a 26-year-old woman with a tattoo she could never remove and a truth she refused to let die. Alexis Blackwood closed her eyes and waited for dawn. In 4 hours, she would either be one step closer to justice or she would be dead, like her father, like her team, like everyone else who had tried to expose what she was about to reveal. She thought about the photograph in her backpack, the one showing her father at 29 years old, standing with Colonel Hartley and 5 other operatives, all of them believing they were serving something greater than themselves. 3 of them were dead now, murdered by the very system they had sworn to defend. Alexis had made a promise to her father's memory, to the names on that list of 52, to everyone who had died believing they were heroes when the truth was they were victims. She would keep that promise, or she would die trying. The sun broke over the horizon, painting the Colorado sky in shades of gold and read, "A new day beginning, a countdown starting. 18 hours to Arlington, 18 hours to the truth, 18 hours before everything changed." The pursuit of truth. The sun climbed higher over Fort Carson, indifferent to the machinery of deception grinding into motion below. In a windowless office, 3 levels beneath the main administrative building, Lieutenant Catherine Sullivan sat at a desk covered in forms that would determine whether 3 people lived or died. Prisoner transfer documentation, vehicle requisition orders, route clearances, every piece of paper, a lie wrapped in official letterhead, every signature, a small act of treason against the system she had served for 12 years. Her hands did not shake. That surprised her. She had expected fear hesitation, the physical manifestation of a conscience at war with itself. Instead, she felt only a cold clarity, a sense that she had been moving toward this moment for years without knowing it. She thought about her brother, First Lieutenant Ryan Sullivan, dead at 28 in what the official report called a training accident, helicopter malfunction during a night exercise. Mechanical failure, no survivors. The Army had given her mother a flag and a pension and words about honor and sacrifice. Catherine had believed it for 2 years. Then she had found Ryan's journal in a box of his belongings her mother could not bear to open. Pages filled with observations about irregularities in supply chains, weapons that disappeared from inventory only to turn up in intelligence reports from hostile territories, questions he had asked his superiors that earned him reassignment to increasingly dangerous positions. The last entry was dated 3 days before his death. "They know I know. Transfer orders came through. I leave Tuesday. If something happens, Kit, do not believe the official story. Find out the truth. Make them pay." Tuesday had been the day Ryan died. Catherine finished the last form and stood. She gathered the papers into a manila folder and walked toward Colonel Hartley's office with the stride of someone who had nothing to hide. She found him standing at his window, staring out at the base with eyes that had seen too much. "It is done," she said. "Transfer approved. 3-vehicle convoy. Standard security protocol. We leave in 90 minutes. Hartley turned. The lines on his face seemed deeper in the morning light. "You understand what we are doing," he said. It was not a question. "Yes, sir. There is no coming back from this. If Blackwood is wrong, if this is some elaborate deception, we will both face court-martial, dishonorable discharge, prison most likely. And if she is right—" Hartley was quiet for a long moment. "If she is right, then everything I have believed about this institution for 35 years is a lie." Catherine nodded. "My brother died in a training accident 6 years ago. At least that is what they told me. But I found his journal. He was investigating weapons trafficking. 3 days later, his helicopter fell out of the sky. She met Hartley's eyes. So I hope to God that Blackwood is right, sir. Because if she is, then my brother did not die in an accident. He was murdered, and the people who killed him are still walking free." Something shifted in Hartley's expression. Recognition, solidarity, the unspoken bond of people who had lost something they could never recover. "Then let us find out the truth," he said quietly. At 0800 hours, 3 vehicles rolled out of Fort Carson, a lead security SUV, a prisoner transport van in the middle, a trailing support vehicle, standard configuration for moving a high-value detainee. Alexis Blackwood sat in the back of the transport van, hands cuffed, dressed in orange detention coveralls. 2 guards sat with her. Both were men Hartley trusted. Both had been told only that this was a classified transfer requiring absolute discretion. Neither knew they were part of a convoy that would never reach its destination. Hartley drove the lead vehicle with Sullivan in the passenger seat. The morning was clear and cold, the kind of day that made the Rocky Mountains look like they had been carved from ice and stone. Interstate 25 stretched north toward Denver, a ribbon of asphalt cutting through terrain that had not changed since before humans thought to name it. They drove in silence for the first 30 miles. The radio crackled occasionally with routine traffic. Nothing unusual. Nothing to suggest that somewhere in Virginia, people were boarding planes with instructions to end this convoy permanently. "How long before they come?" Sullivan asked. "Vaughn will wait until we are far enough from the base that an incident looks plausible," Hartley said. "Somewhere remote. Somewhere he can control the narrative." "How much time does that give us?" "Not enough." They passed mile marker 42. The highway curved through a section of road bordered by steep embankments on both sides. Dense pine forest stretched away from the road, broken only by occasional fire access routes that disappeared into darkness beneath the canopy. Hartley's radio came alive with a voice that did not belong to anyone in the convoy. "Security convoy. Fort Carson Transport. This is Federal Interdiction Team. Pull over immediately and prepare for inspection." Hartley's jaw tightened. He keyed his radio. "Negative. This is a classified military transfer. We have no record of interdiction orders." "You have them now, Colonel. Pull over, or we will disable your vehicles." Sullivan looked at Hartley. "That is not federal procedure." "No," Hartley agreed. "It is an execution squad." He accelerated. Behind them, 4 black SUVs emerged from a side road with the precision of vehicles that had been waiting. No lights, no sirens, just 4 tons of steel and bad intentions closing the distance with mechanical certainty. Hartley grabbed his radio. "All units, we are under attack. Evasive action. Do not stop." The lead SUV from the pursuit opened fire, not with standard law enforcement weapons, with automatic rifles firing armor-piercing rounds that punched through the rear door of the transport van like it was made of paper. One of the guards inside screamed and went down. Blood sprayed across the interior. Alexis moved without thinking. She grabbed the fallen guard's sidearm, brought her cuffed hands up, and fired 3 rounds through the rear window. One of the pursuing SUVs swerved violently as its windshield exploded. "Who the hell is she?" the surviving guard shouted. "Someone who wants to live," Alexis snapped. "Get these cuffs off me. Now." The guard hesitated for maybe half a second. Then he saw another burst of gunfire tear through the van's side panel. He pulled out his key and released Alexis's restraints. She rubbed her wrists once, then took position at the shattered rear window with the guard's Glock 17 held in a 2-handed grip that spoke of thousands of hours of training. The pursuers opened fire again. Alexis returned fire with controlled precision. 3 shots. The lead SUV's front tire exploded. The vehicle fishtailed wildly before slamming into the embankment in a shower of sparks and twisted metal. 3 pursuers left. Hartley pushed the convoy faster. 70 miles per hour. 80. The vehicles were not built for this kind of speed. The transport van shook and rattled like it was trying to tear itself apart. "We cannot outrun them," Sullivan said. "No," Hartley agreed, "but we can outlast them." He saw what he was looking for. A fire access road cutting into the forest on the right side of the highway, barely wide enough for 1 vehicle, unpaved, probably unmapped. Perfect. "All units hard right in 3 seconds. Follow me into the forest." He did not wait for confirmation. He wrenched the wheel, and the lead SUV left the highway at 60 miles per hour. The vehicle bucked and slammed as it hit the dirt road. Behind him, the transport van followed, then the support vehicle. The pursuers followed without hesitation. The forest closed in around them. Trees whipped past on both sides, so close that branches scraped against metal. The road twisted and turned with no apparent pattern. Hartley drove on instinct and 35 years of experience in places where roads were suggestions rather than certainties. A burst of gunfire from behind. One of the pursuit vehicles was gaining. Alexis leaned out the broken rear window of the transport van and emptied the Glock's magazine. 15 rounds in 4 seconds. The pursuing SUV's windshield turned into a spider web of cracks. It veered left and smashed into a tree trunk with enough force to fold the hood like an accordion. 2 pursuers left. The road forked. Hartley took the right branch without slowing. It was narrower, steeper, climbing into terrain that 4-wheel drive vehicles could handle, but that would punish anything moving at speed. Behind them, one of the pursuers tried to follow. The vehicle hit a hidden washout and flipped. It rolled 3 times before coming to rest, upside down, in a ravine, wheels spinning uselessly in the air. 1 pursuer left, but that vehicle was newer, faster, and driven by someone who knew exactly what they were doing. It closed the distance relentlessly. The driver lined up a shot. Then Sullivan did something that would have gotten her court-martialed under any other circumstances. She pulled her service pistol, rolled down her window, and emptied the magazine backward while Hartley drove. 15 rounds fired, while hanging half out of a vehicle moving 50 miles per hour over terrain that looked like God had used it to test out different ways to break axles. 11 rounds missed. 3 hit the grill. 1 punched through the radiator. Steam exploded from the pursuit vehicle's hood. It slowed, faltered, and finally stopped as the engine seized. Silence. Nothing behind them but empty forest and settling dust. Hartley drove for another 5 miles before he finally stopped. They were deep in terrain that might as well have been on another planet. No roads, no signs of civilization, just trees and stone and the thin mountain air that made every breath feel insufficient. He stepped out of the vehicle. His hands were shaking now, adrenaline finding its way out through trembling fingers and a heartbeat that thundered in his ears. The transport van's rear doors opened. Alexis emerged, still wearing orange coveralls, now torn and blood-stained. She was holding the empty Glock and breathing hard. The surviving guard climbed out after her, looking shell-shocked. "What the hell just happened?" the guard demanded. "We were attacked by people pretending to be federal agents," Hartley said. "People who wanted us dead." "Why?" Hartley looked at Alexis. She met his eyes and nodded once. "Permission granted." "Because I'm supposed to be dead," Alexis said, "and the people who tried to kill me 7 years ago do not appreciate me walking around proving them wrong." The guard stared at her, then at Hartley, then at the forest around them, like it might offer some kind of explanation. "You are telling me we just survived an assassination attempt by our own people?" "Yes," Hartley said simply. "Jesus Christ." "He is not involved in this," Sullivan said. She was checking her weapon, counting remaining ammunition, with the mechanical precision of someone in shock, but still functional. "Just men with guns and orders to leave no witnesses." Hartley pulled out a satellite phone and dialed a number he had memorized but never used. It rang 4 times before a gruff voice answered. "Hartley." "That you?" "Barnes. I need a favor. Hell of a time to be calling. I am retired." "I know. That is why I am calling. I need extraction. 3 people. Immediate. No questions." There was a long pause. "You in trouble, Nathaniel?" "The kind that does not go away." Another pause. Then, "Give me your coordinates. I will have someone there in 2 hours." Hartley read off the GPS coordinates from his phone. Barnes grunted acknowledgement and hung up. They waited. 2 hours in the forest with nothing but the sound of wind through pines and the occasional distant crack of a branch falling. The wounded guard from the transport van had been stabilized as much as possible. The bullet had gone through his shoulder. Painful, but survivable if they got him to a hospital soon. Alexis sat on a fallen log, staring at nothing. Hartley approached slowly. "You did well back there," he said. "I survived. That is not the same as doing well. You saved our lives. I put your lives in danger by existing." Hartley sat down beside her. His leg was aching from the crash and chase. It always did after extended action. A reminder that he was 58 years old and bodies did not forgive the sins of youth. "Tell me about Damascus," he said quietly. Lexus was quiet for a long time. When she finally spoke, her voice was distant, detached, the tone of someone recounting events that had happened to someone else. "We were 7. I was 19, youngest by 5 years. They called me the prodigy. Said I had my father's instincts for codes and patterns. Said I would be the next generation of Sentinel operatives." She picked up a pine cone and turned it over in her hands. "The mission brief came from Director Vaughn personally. Chemical weapons facility outside Damascus. Intel suggested it was a production site for sarin gas. Our job was to infiltrate plant charges extract before detonation. Standard destruction protocol. What went wrong? Everything. We breached the perimeter exactly as planned, moved through the facility like ghosts, set the charges, and then we realized the building was empty. No weapons, no equipment, nothing but empty rooms and concrete." She crushed the pine cone slowly. "That is when they hit us, Syrian military. At least 30 soldiers. They knew we were coming, knew our entry point, knew our extraction route. They had been waiting." Her voice went flat. "6 people died in 4 minutes. I watched them get cut down one by one. Our team leader took 3 rounds to the chest, calling for extraction that never came. Our demolitions expert got hit, trying to reach cover, just one after another, until it was just me." "How did you survive?" "I played dead, fell down with everyone else. Let them think the blood on me was my own. Held my breath while they checked bodies. And when they left, I crawled through 200 meters of corpse and rubble and extracted myself." She looked at Hartley. "But before I left, I grabbed a laptop from one of the dead Syrian officers. Curiosity, anger, desperation. I do not know. I just knew I needed something to explain why we had walked into an ambush." "What did you find?" "Show me emails. Going back 3 months. Coordination between Syrian intelligence and someone using a CIA server. Details about our mission, our team composition, our operational timetable, everything." Her eyes were hard now. "Someone sold us out, Colonel. Someone with access to the highest levels of Sentinel operation planning. Someone who wanted that team dead badly enough to coordinate with a hostile foreign power to make it happen. And you think that someone is Vaughn?" "I do not think. I know. I spent 7 years following the trail. 7 years living in 12 different countries under 14 different names. Working as a hacker, a security consultant, anything that gave me access to the kind of networks where classified information gets traded." She pulled the USB drive from her pocket. "This contains evidence of 17 operations like Damascus, spanning 15 years, all with the same pattern. Teams sent into situations where the intelligence was bad, where the enemy was waiting, where good soldiers died for reasons that had nothing to do with national security. And you believe Vaughn is behind all of them. Not just Vaughn. He is the architect, but there are at least 30 others involved. Military procurement officers, defense contractors, intelligence analysts, all of them working together to run what is essentially a protection racket. They steal weapons from military stockpiles, sell them to whoever will pay. And when someone gets close to discovering the truth, they send them on a mission that ends in a body bag." Hartley felt something cold and terrible settling in his chest. "How much is this network worth?" "Based on the financial data I have traced, approximately $6.3 billion over 40 years. Enough money to buy silence, to alter records, to make entire teams of trained operatives disappear like they never existed." She met his eyes. "Your mentor, the man who trained you, the legend of the Cold War. He has been running the most successful criminal enterprise in CIA history, and he has been doing it with the full resources and authority of the United States government." Hartley wanted to argue, wanted to find the flaw in her logic. But he had seen the assassination team, had survived an attack by people with military-grade weapons and the training to use them. had watched his own government try to kill him for the crime of helping a woman who should be dead. The evidence was not theoretical anymore. It was bullet holes in a transport van and a wounded guard and 4 destroyed vehicles scattered across 20 miles of Colorado forest. The evidence in Arlington, he said. What is in it? Everything. Complete financial records, intercepted communications, video and audio recordings of Vaughn and his network coordinating weapons sales, and most importantly, the original documents from 1985 when this whole operation began. Why 1985? Because that is when Vaughn first deployed to Afghanistan during the Soviet War. The CIA was running guns to the Mujahideen, billions of dollars in weapons flowing through Pakistan. Vaughn saw an opportunity. He realized that with the right connections, he could skim from that pipeline, sell to both sides, play every angle. She stood and began pacing. When the Cold War ended, he was smart enough to transition. He used his position to maintain the network, to recruit others, to expand into every major conflict zone over the next 4 decades. Iraq, Afghanistan, again, Syria, Libya. Everywhere America went, Vaughn's network went too. And your father? Alexis stopped pacing. He discovered it by accident. He was a communications specialist. He noticed irregularities in supply manifests during the Gulf War, weapons that were listed as destroyed, but that he had seen loaded onto trucks going the wrong direction. He started asking questions, and Vaughn had him killed. Not immediately. First they tried to discredit him, transfer him, bury him in paperwork. But my father would not let it go. So 3 days before he was scheduled to give a deposition to an inspector general, he died in a firefight. Friendly fire. They gave my mother a medal and told her he died a hero. Her voice cracked slightly. I was 4 years old. I have exactly 3 memories of my father. His laugh, the way he used to read to me before bed, and the day my mother told me he was never coming home. Hartley stood and put a hand on her shoulder, a gesture of solidarity, of recognition that some wounds never healed, they just learned to hide better. We will finish this, he said, for your father, for all of them. The sound of rotor blades interrupted the moment. A helicopter appeared over the trees. Private, unmarked. It settled into a clearing 200 yards away with the kind of precision that suggested a pilot who had done this before. Barnes himself was waiting when they reached the helicopter. 63 years old, built like a steel barrel, with a face that looked like it had been carved with a dull knife. He took one look at the group and shook his head. Nathaniel Hartley, never thought I would see you running from anything. Times change. Apparently, who is she? Someone who is about to end a 40-year conspiracy, if we can keep her alive long enough. Barnes studied Alexis with the eye of a man who had spent 4 decades evaluating threats and assets. She looks like she can handle herself. She killed 4 men in the last 2 hours, Sullivan said. So yes, she can handle herself. Barnes grunted. Where are we going? Arlington, Virginia, Hartley said. That is a long flight, and I'm going to need to refuel. How long? 12 hours if we push it. 14 if we are smart. Hartley looked at Alexis. She nodded. 12 hours, Hartley said. We do not have 14. They loaded into the helicopter. The wounded guard was strapped into a medical gurney. The rest found seats where they could. The helicopter lifted off and turned east, leaving behind the forest and the abandoned vehicles and the evidence of a battle that officially never happened. Below them, Colorado gave way to Kansas. Endless flatlands stretching to horizons that seemed impossibly distant. They flew low, avoiding radar following terrain that made tracking difficult. Hartley sat next to Alexis and pulled out the USB drive she had given him. He plugged it into a ruggedized laptop and began reviewing files. What he found made his blood run cold. 17 operations, each one documented in painful detail. Team compositions, mission objectives. After-action reports, filed by Vaughn himself, explaining why operatives had died. Mechanical failures, intelligence errors, enemy action. Every report professionally written and utterly false. But mixed in with the official reports were other documents. Emails between Vaughn and various co-conspirators. Financial transfers that coincided with weapons shipments. Intercepted communications showing Vaughn coordinating with arms dealers, warlords, and representatives from hostile governments. And running through all of it, one name kept appearing. Major Daniel Blackwood, not as a victim, as an investigator. There were memos he had written, reports flagging discrepancies, requests for audits that were denied. And finally, a personal journal entry dated 3 days before his death. I know what Vaughn is doing. I have proof. Tomorrow, I brief the Inspector General. This ends now. Hartley closed the laptop and looked at Alexis. She was staring out the window at the landscape passing below. Your father was braver than I ever knew, he said quietly. He was an idiot, Alexis said, without turning. He thought the system would protect him, thought truth mattered more than power. It got him killed. But you are finishing what he started. I am not doing this because I believe in the system, Colonel. I am doing this because 52 people are dead and someone needs to pay for it. They flew in silence for another hour. Then Sullivan spoke up from her position near the cockpit. We have a problem. Hartley moved forward. Sullivan was monitoring a tablet connected to the helicopter's communications system. What is it? Chatter on CIA frequencies. They know we are airborne. They are trying to track us. Can they? Not immediately, but we need to refuel. And the moment we land at any facility with proper clearances, they will know where we are. Barnes turned from the pilot's seat. I have a place. Private airstrip in Tennessee. Guy owes me a favor. No questions asked. How far? 2 hours at current speed. Hartley made the calculation. It meant longer flight time, more risk of being tracked. But it also meant avoiding official channels where Vaughn could intercept them. Do it. They adjusted course. The sun climbed toward its apex and began its descent. Below them, America stretched out in all its vast complexity. Cities and farms and wilderness, all of it connected by networks of power and influence that most people never saw. Alexis watched the landscape scroll past and thought about her father, about the last conversation they had ever had, though she had been too young to remember it, about the choice he made to fight a battle he could not win. She understood that choice now, understood why someone would sacrifice everything for a truth that most people would never believe, because the alternative was to let evil prosper, to let good people die while pretending nothing was wrong, to become complicit through silence. Her father had refused that complicity. It had killed him. But it had also taught her the most important lesson of her life, that some things were worth dying for, and that justice delayed was not the same as justice denied. She had waited 7 years, lived in the shadows, gathered evidence one painful piece at a time. Now, she was maybe 12 hours from ending it, or 12 hours from joining her father in a grave marked by a lie. Either way, the waiting was almost over. Pandora, unleashed. The private airstrip in Tennessee was little more than a gravel runway carved out of pine forest and wishful thinking. A single hangar leaned against the wind like an old man too stubborn to fall. The fuel pump looked like it predated the Cold War, but Barnes brought the helicopter down with the precision of a surgeon, and the man who emerged from the hangar asked no questions beyond what fuel grade they needed. They refueled in 20 minutes, paid in cash that Barnes produced from a lockbox bolted to the helicopter floor. The transaction had the feel of something that happened regularly in places where official records were considered optional. Back in the air, heading northeast toward Virginia. The sun was low now, painting the sky in shades of amber and blood. Hartley checked his watch. 1,600 hours. 4 in the afternoon. They would reach Arlington after dark. Good. Darkness was an ally when you were breaking into a bank. Sullivan was monitoring communications traffic again, her face illuminated by the tablet's glow. CIA frequencies are active. They are coordinating something big, multiple teams being deployed. To where? Hartley asked. They are being careful not to say over open channels, but based on the call signs, I would guess every major metropolitan area between here and Virginia. They are setting a trap. Multiple traps. They do not know where we are landing, so they are covering everywhere we might go. Alexis leaned forward from her seat. What about Arlington specifically? Sullivan worked the tablet for a moment. Heavy presence. At least 3 teams that I can identify from the traffic patterns. More probably on standby. They know we are coming for the bank. Vaughn is not stupid, Hartley said. He knows what you hid and where. He is betting everything on stopping us before we can retrieve it. Then we need to be smarter than they expect. You have a plan? Alexis smiled. It was not a happy expression. I have been planning this for 7 years, Colonel. I did not come this far to fail because Vaughn put some guards around a bank. They landed at a small private airport 40 miles west of Arlington as full darkness settled over Virginia. Barnes killed the engines and turned to face his passengers. This is as far as I go. I did not see you. I do not know where you are going. And if anyone asks, this helicopter has been in my hangar for the last 3 days getting maintenance. Hartley extended his hand. I owe you. You have owed me since Kandahar. Now we are even. Barnes gripped his hand firmly. But Nathaniel, if you survive this, you are going to have one hell of a story. If I survive, I will buy you a drink and tell you all of it. I will hold you to that. They unloaded what gear they had. Not much. Sidearms. A tablet with Sullivan's communication intercepts. The USB drive containing 40% of the evidence. And Alexis's absolute certainty about what came next. Sullivan had arranged for a vehicle. A 15-year-old Ford sedan that looked like it had spent its life hauling groceries and children to soccer practice. Perfect. Invisible. The kind of car that surveillance teams would look past a dozen times without registering. Alexis drove. Hartley sat passenger Sullivan and back. They took surface streets avoiding highways where license plate readers could flag their passage. It added 30 minutes to the drive, but kept them off the grid. Arlington at night was a different creature than Arlington by day. The federal buildings and monuments gave way to residential neighborhoods and commercial districts that could have been anywhere in America. Strip malls and chain restaurants and houses with small yards where ordinary people lived ordinary lives. People who had no idea that 40 miles away, their government was coordinating a manhunt for 3 people whose only crime was refusing to die quietly. The bank was located in a district that catered to the kind of clientele who needed high-security storage and discretion. No signs advertising services. No flashy displays. Just a granite facade and tinted windows and the subtle markers of serious money protecting serious secrets. Alexis drove past once without slowing. Hartley counted 4 men in vehicles parked at strategic points around the block. 2 more standing near the entrance, trying to look like they were waiting for someone. They are not even trying to be subtle, Sullivan observed. They do not need to be, Alexis said. Official teams doing official work. Anyone who notices will assume it is legitimate law enforcement. Can we get past them? Not through the front door. She turned down an alley 3 blocks over and parked behind a closed restaurant, killed the engine, and sat very still for a moment, hands on the wheel, breathing slowly. During the Cold War, she said quietly. CIA built networks throughout major cities. Safe houses, dead drops, escape routes. Most got decommissioned after 1991, but some remained active for black programs that officially did not exist. Like Project Sentinel. Exactly. This bank was chosen specifically because it sits above an old Cold War tunnel network. Access points exist that are not on any modern blueprints. Hartley felt something click into place. Your father knew about the tunnels. He helped map them back in '89, before I was born, before he knew what Vaughn was building. He made copies of the old maps, put them in his encrypted journals. He probably never imagined his daughter would use them to break into a bank. She opened the door. There is an access point in the basement of the building next door. Maintenance entrance. The security is old. Mechanical locks, no cameras. We can be inside in 5 minutes. They moved through darkness with the practiced silence of people trained to be invisible. The building next door was office space, mostly empty this time of night. A few lights still burned on upper floors where someone was working late, but the ground level was dark and quiet. Alexis produced a lockpick set from her jacket. 30 seconds later, the maintenance door swung open on hinges that needed oil. They descended concrete stairs into a basement that smelled of mildew and forgotten storage. The tunnel entrance was hidden behind an electrical panel that looked like it had not been opened since the Nixon administration. Alexis removed the panel with a screwdriver pulled from a workbench. Behind it, a steel door with a combination lock. She spun the dial with confidence born from practice. 6 numbers in a sequence that made sense only if you understood the Cold War paranoia that had designed this place. The lock clicked. The door opened on darkness that breathed stale air like a tomb unsealed. "Stay close," Alexis said. "The tunnels are not maintained anymore. Watch for weak spots in the floor." They descended further into earth and concrete and history. The tunnel stretched ahead, lit only by the flashlights on their phones. Water dripped somewhere in the distance. Their footsteps echoed strangely, reflecting off walls that had been built to contain secrets. Hartley had been in places like this before, relics of a time when the enemy was clear and the mission was simple and moral certainty came easier. Now, he was using those same relics to hide from his own government, while helping a woman prove that his greatest mentor was a murderer. The world had gotten complicated. The tunnel branched multiple times. Alexis navigated without hesitation, following a mental map built from her father's journals, left at the junction, straight through the section where ceiling tiles had collapsed, right at the junction marked with a faded number 7 painted on the wall 40 years ago. Finally, she stopped before another steel door. This one was newer, reinforced, with a modern electronic lock that glowed softly in the darkness. "The bank upgraded this access point 15 years ago," Alexis said. "They thought they were sealing an old vulnerability. They did not realize they were sealing themselves in." She pulled out the tablet Sullivan had been carrying and connected it to the lock's interface port. Her fingers flew across the screen with the speed of someone who spoke fluent digital. Code scrolled past faster than Hartley could follow. "Firewalls are good," Alexis murmured, "but not that good. Encryption is military grade. Probably sold to the bank by one of Vaughn's contractors. Ironic." 3 minutes of work. Then the lock clicked green and the door opened. They emerged in the bank's vault level. Rows of security deposit boxes lined the walls like steel honeycomb. Emergency lighting provided dim illumination. Somewhere above them, the surveillance teams watched the streets, never imagining that their target had already bypassed them entirely. Alexis moved to box 2847, third row middle section. She produced a key from a chain around her neck. A key she had carried for 7 years, waiting for this moment. The box opened. Inside, a single external hard drive. Black. Nondescript. Worth absolutely nothing and absolutely everything. Alexis held it like it was made of something more fragile than electronics and plastic. 7 years of her life. 52 dead people, $6.3 billion in stolen weapons, all of it encoded in magnetic patterns on spinning platters. Is that it? Sullivan asked. This is everything, Alexis confirmed. Complete financial records going back to 1985, audio and video recordings, intercepted communications, the original documents showing how Vaughn set up the network, names, dates, transactions. Everything needed to prosecute 31 people for treason murder and enough conspiracy charges to fill a law library. She closed her hand around the drive. This is what my father died trying to expose. This is justice. The lights went out. Emergency lighting died. The vault plunged into absolute darkness. And in that darkness, Hartley heard the unmistakable sound of the tunnel door slamming shut behind them. They know we are here, Sullivan said quietly. Footsteps echoed from multiple directions. Flashlight beams swept through the darkness above them. Voices coordinated over radio frequencies. Subjects in vault level, all exits sealed. Initiate containment protocol. Hartley pulled his weapon. Sullivan did the same. Alexis secured the hard drive in her jacket and drew the Glock she had taken from the guard so many hours ago. We need another exit, Hartley said. There is not one, Alexis replied. They designed this vault to be a kill box if anyone ever breached it. One way in, one way out. And they control both. Then we fight. Against how many? As if answering her question, lights blazed on throughout the vault level, harsh, blinding. Hartley shielded his eyes and counted silhouettes. 10 armed men entering from the main vault entrance, more visible in the tunnel behind them. And standing in the middle of the tactical team, wearing a gray suit that probably cost more than most people earned in a month, was Director Cornelius Vaughn. 72 years old, and he moved with the confidence of a man who had never lost. Silver hair perfectly styled, eyes sharp as cut glass. The face that had appeared in news coverage about heroic CIA operations. The man who had briefed 3 presidents. The legend. The murderer. Nathaniel, Vaughn said, his voice carrying easily across the vault. Put the weapons down. This does not need to end badly. It already ended badly, Hartley replied. The moment you decided that selling weapons to terrorists was more important than the lives of the people under your command. Vaughn smiled. It was a sad expression, like a teacher disappointed in a promising student. You do not understand. You never did. I tried to teach you, tried to show you how the world really works, but you always saw things in black and white, right and wrong. As if those concepts mean anything in the real world. They mean everything. They mean nothing. Governments lie. Soldiers die. Money moves through channels that politicians pretend do not exist. I simply took advantage of a system that was already corrupt. I made myself wealthy doing what my country was too hypocritical to admit it was doing anyway. Hartley felt rage building in his chest. Rage at the casual dismissal. Rage at the decades of betrayal. Rage at how easily this man justified 52 murders. Daniel Blackwood, he said. Did he mean nothing? Something flickered in Vaughn's expression. Almost like regret. Almost. Daniel was brilliant. One of the best intelligence analysts I ever worked with. But he was naive. He thought exposing the network would somehow make things better, would reform the system. He did not understand that the system does not want to be reformed. So you had him killed. I had him reassigned to a position where accidents happen. There is a difference. Not to his daughter. Vaughn's eyes shifted to Alexis, really seeing her for the first time. Recognition bloomed slowly. Alexis Blackwood, you look like your father. Same eyes. Same stubborn refusal to accept reality. You murdered him, Alexis said. Her voice was steady, cold, the voice of someone who had lived with rage so long it had become part of her DNA. I removed a threat to an operation worth billions of dollars. Your father made a choice. He could have walked away, could have accepted reassignment, and lived a long, comfortable life. Instead, he chose principle over pragmatism. That choice killed him. And Damascus, you were never supposed to survive that. The fact that you did represents a failure in planning that I have spent 7 years trying to correct. Vaughn gestured to the armed men surrounding them. But we all make mistakes. I am correcting mine now. You cannot kill us all, Hartley said. Too many people know we are here. Do they 3 fugitives running from legitimate law enforcement? A tragic shootout when they refused to surrender. The official report will be quite clear. You broke into a secure facility, took hostages, forced our hand. The president himself will issue a statement expressing regret at the loss of a decorated colonel, who unfortunately succumbed to paranoid delusions in his final years. Vaughn's smile widened. That is the beauty of controlling the narrative, Nathaniel. Reality becomes whatever I say it is. Alexis spoke, then her voice cutting through the vault like a blade. Except I do not need to survive for the truth to come out. Vaughn's smile faltered slightly. The hard drive in my jacket contains 60% of the evidence, Alexis continued. Combined with the 40% I already distributed, it is enough to destroy you. But even if you kill me and take this drive, it will not matter. She pulled out her phone. The screen glowed softly in the harsh light. Do you know what a dead man's switch is? Director. Vaughn's expression went very still. 7 years ago, when I first started gathering evidence, I knew I might not survive to see justice done. So I built a system, a network of encrypted servers distributed across 14 countries. Every piece of evidence I collected was uploaded and stored with instructions. Simple instructions. She held up the phone. If I do not input a specific code every 72 hours, those servers automatically decrypt and distribute everything to 53 recipients. News organizations, congressional oversight committees, international courts, intelligence agencies, and allied nations. Every single one will receive complete documentation of your network. Vaughn's face had gone pale. You are bluffing. Am I? You have been hunting me for 7 years. In all that time, did you ever wonder why I never tried to go public before? Why I waited? It was not fear. It was preparation. She smiled then, cold, victorious. 3 hours ago, I sent a message to that system, told it to prepare for final distribution. If I do not cancel that instruction in the next 48 hours, everything publishes automatically. Every file, every recording, every transaction, the whole truth about what you built. She took a step forward. So go ahead, shoot me. But understand that pulling that trigger ends your world, not in some abstract future sense. In 48 hours, your network exposed, your co-conspirators identified, your legacy destroyed. The vault was absolutely silent. 31 people holding their breath. Vaughn staring at a 26-year-old woman who had just checkmated him with 7 years of planning and the ghost of her father's unfinished work. You have no proof of this system, Vaughn said finally. Do not I? Alexis pressed something on her phone. Every device in the vault suddenly came alive. Phones buzzed, tablets chimed, even the armed guards' tactical radios crackled with incoming messages. Every screen displayed the same thing. A PDF document titled The Vaughn Network Evidence of Systematic Weapons Trafficking 1985-2025, and at the top, a timestamp showing automatic distribution scheduled for 48 hours from now. One of the armed guards looked at his phone, looked at Vaughn, his weapon lowered slightly. Sir, this cannot be real. But Vaughn knew it was. Hartley could see it in his eyes, the calculations running behind them, the realization that he had finally encountered a problem that could not be solved with bullets and money. You cannot release this, Vaughn said. Do you have any idea what it would do? The geopolitical implications, the damage to national security. I understand perfectly, Alexis replied. But those are not my problem. My problem is that you killed my father, that you killed 51 other good people, that you profited from death and called it patriotism. This is bigger than revenge. This is not revenge. This is justice. There is a difference. Another guard lowered his weapon, then another. The facade was cracking. Vaughn's authority draining away as the men realized they were not following orders to protect national security. They were accessories to murder. Vaughn saw it happening, saw control slipping through his fingers. He reached for his own weapon. Hartley moved faster. The shot echoed like thunder in the enclosed space. Vaughn's weapon fell from his hand. He stumbled backward, clutching his shoulder, blood seeping between his fingers. On your knees, Hartley commanded. His voice carried 3.5 decades of authority. Now. Vaughn sank slowly to his knees. Around him, his security team did nothing, made no move to defend him, because they were finally seeing him clearly. Not as a director, not as a legend, but as a criminal caught in the act. Sullivan moved forward with zip ties, secured Vaughn's hands behind his back, with the efficiency of someone who had arrested hundreds of people over her career. Cornelius Vaughn, you are under arrest for treason, murder weapons trafficking, and conspiracy. You have the right to remain silent. The words were formulaic, legal, but they carried weight that made the air feel thick. Above them, more footsteps. But these were different. Federal agents, real ones, led by a gray-haired woman in an FBI windbreaker, who took one look at the scene and nodded like she had been expecting exactly this. Colonel Hartley, Miss Blackwood, we received your transmission 40 minutes ago. Took us that long to coordinate response with DOJ approval. She looked at Vaughn kneeling on the floor. Director Vaughn, I am Special Agent Williams, FBI Counterintelligence. We have a lot to discuss. Alexis sagged slightly, the adrenaline that had carried her through the last 18 hours finally draining away. Hartley caught her elbow. It is over, he said quietly. No, Alexis corrected. Now it begins. The next 48 hours passed in a blur of debriefings and testimony and evidence review. Alexis sat in interview rooms that looked exactly like the one at Fort Carson, where this had started. But this time, she was not a prisoner. She was a witness. The star witness in what was already being called the largest corruption scandal in modern American history. The hard drive contained everything she had promised. Financial records showing exactly how money moved from military stockpiles to offshore accounts to weapons dealers operating in every conflict zone from the Balkans to the Middle East. Audio recordings of Vaughn coordinating sales. Video of weapon shipments being loaded onto trucks by people in American military uniforms. And most damning, the original documents from 1985. The founding papers of what Vaughn had initially called Project Contingency, his private insurance policy against the end of the Cold War. A way to ensure that even if peace broke out, he would remain rich and powerful. The evidence was overwhelming, undeniable. The kind of smoking gun that did not just convict individuals, but brought down entire networks. Within 72 hours, 31 arrests across 8 government agencies, military officers, CIA analysts, defense contractors, congressional staffers, all of them connected to Vaughn's network, all of them facing charges that would put them away for life. The media frenzy was immediate and absolute. Every network led with the story. Congressional oversight committees scheduled emergency hearings. The president went on television to promise swift justice and systemic reform. And in the center of it all was Alexis Blackwood, the operative who came back from the dead, the woman who spent 7 years preparing to destroy the most successful criminal conspiracy in CIA history. They offered her witness protection, relocation, a new identity, everything the government did for people who burned their old lives to the ground. She declined. I already lived as a ghost for 7 years. She told the assistant attorney general handling the case, I am not going back to hiding. Instead, she testified. First in closed session before the Senate Intelligence Committee, then in open hearings that were broadcast live to a nation hungry for accountability. She sat at a table with a microphone and a glass of water and told the story of Damascus, of her father, of 52 people who died because someone valued profit over human life. She did not cry, did not perform emotion for the cameras. She simply stated facts in a voice that carried the weight of 7 years spent living in shadows. The gallery was packed. Journalists, congressional staff, family members of the 52 victims, people who had spent years believing their loved ones died serving their country, now learning they had been murdered for discovering a truth that powerful people wanted buried. When Alexis finished her testimony, the room was absolutely silent. Then one person stood and began clapping. Then another. Then the entire gallery was on its feet, applauding a woman who refused to let injustice prosper, simply because it came from high places. Hartley watched from the back of the room. He had already given his own testimony, had already accepted his role in this story, had already explained to a panel of senators exactly why he had chosen to help a fugitive rather than follow orders from a director who turned out to be a criminal. They did not court-martial him. Instead, they promoted him, elevated his rank to brigadier general, and asked him to head a task force reforming intelligence oversight. A position he accepted with the understanding that real reform meant exposing every lie no matter how uncomfortable. Sullivan was offered similar recognition, a promotion, commendations, the bureaucracy's way of saying thank you for not looking the other way. She accepted on one condition, that her brother's death be reinvestigated, that the truth about the helicopter crash that killed him be exposed, that his name be added to the memorial being planned for the 52 victims. They agreed immediately. 3 months after the arrest, they held the ceremony at Arlington National Cemetery, a memorial wall of black granite inscribed with 52 names. The first name was Major Daniel Blackwood. The second was First Lieutenant Ryan Sullivan. The rest followed in alphabetical order without rank or distinction, just names and dates. People who had served faithfully and died because someone decided that loyalty was less valuable than money. Alexis stood before the wall, wearing a black suit, no uniform. She had been offered reinstatement into military service, offered a position, offered everything except what she actually wanted, which was her father back. Hartley stood beside her in his dress uniform. The stars on his shoulders felt heavier than they should. Sullivan stood on her other side, hands folded, eyes on her brother's name. The president gave a speech about sacrifice and betrayal and the work that remained to ensure this never happened again. The words were good, probably even meant, but Alexis barely heard them. She was thinking about her father, about journals filled with observations and warnings that no one heeded, about a man who tried to do the right thing and paid for it with his life. She was thinking about Damascus, about 6 people who died believing their country valued their service, about the moment she realized that survival meant accepting a truth that no one wanted to hear. She was thinking about 7 years of hiding, of living under false names in forgotten places, of gathering evidence one piece at a time, of the patience required to build a case that could not be dismissed or buried or explained away. The ceremony ended. People dispersed slowly. Some lingered by the memorial tracing names with their fingers, saying goodbye to people they had lost twice. Once to death, once to the lie that made that death meaningful. Hartley put a hand on Alexis's shoulder. Your father would be proud. My father would be alive if people had listened to him 34 years ago. Yes, Hartley agreed. He would be. But because they did not listen, you had to finish what he started. And you did. That matters. Does it Vaughn and his network are in prison? But the system that enabled them is still there. The loopholes, the classified budgets, the oversight committees that do not actually oversee anything. How long before someone else decides to build their own empire? Maybe never. Maybe tomorrow. But because you expose the truth, people are watching now. The next person who tries this will face a military and intelligence community that knows it can happen. That is not justice, but it is something. Alexis turned to look at him, really look at him. Nathaniel Hartley had given up 35 years of belief to help her, had sacrificed his faith in the institution he served because he chose to believe a woman who should have been dead. Thank you, she said quietly. For what? For seeing the tattoo, for asking questions, for choosing truth over obedience. Hartley smiled. It was a tired expression, but genuine. I spent my whole career following orders from people I assumed were honorable. When I discovered they were not, I had a choice. Keep following orders and become complicit, or break every rule I had ever lived by and do what was right. He shrugged. It was not actually a hard choice. Sullivan approached, carrying 3 cups of coffee from somewhere. She handed them out like communion. What happens now? She asked. Now, I go back to being a civilian, Alexis said. They offered me positions, careers, everything except what I actually want. Which is, to not be defined by this anymore, to not be the woman who survived Damascus, to not be Daniel Blackwood's daughter, seeking revenge, to just be someone normal. You realize that is impossible, Hartley said. You are a Medal of Honor recipient. You brought down the largest corruption scandal in American history. You are going to be testifying in trials for years. Normal is not in your future. Maybe not, but I can try. They stood together in silence, drinking coffee that was too hot and watching the sun set over Arlington. Over the graves of thousands who died wearing uniforms that promised they were serving something greater than themselves. Most of them had. Most of them had died honorably for causes they believed in. But 52 had died because someone betrayed every principle their uniforms represented. Now, those 52 had names on a wall, had families who knew the truth, had a nation that finally understood what had been done to them. It was not enough, could never be enough. But it was something. Alexis finished her coffee and turned to leave. Then she paused and looked back at the memorial one last time. Goodbye, Dad, she said softly. Your mission is complete. She walked away from Arlington with Hartley and Sullivan flanking her. 3 people who had chosen truth over orders, who had risked everything to expose a corruption that most people would never have believed possible. Behind them, the sun continued its descent. The memorial wall caught the last light, names glowing golden for a moment before shadow claimed them. But they remained, permanent, undeniable, a record that said these people had existed, had served, had died, and had not been forgotten. Justice might be delayed, but it had finally arrived. 6 months later, Alexis sat in a coffee shop in Portland, Oregon, a city chosen because she had never been there before, where no one knew her face despite the media coverage, where she could buy a newspaper and read about the ongoing trials without seeing her own name mentioned. Her laptop was open. She was working as a cybersecurity consultant under her real name. No more false identities. No more hiding. Just Alexis Blackwood offering services to companies that needed to protect themselves from people like she used to be. The work was boring, was exactly what she wanted. Her phone buzzed. A message from Hartley. Vaughn sentencing today. Thought you would want to know. She had chosen not to attend. Had given her victim impact statement months ago. Had said everything she needed to say about what his actions had cost. Sitting in a courtroom while a judge imposed a sentence would not change anything. But she pulled up the news feed anyway. Watched the live stream as Cornelius Vaughn, looking 20 years older than he had in that vault, stood before a federal judge and heard his fate. Life in prison, without possibility of parole. 52 consecutive life sentences, one for each victim. Plus additional sentences for treason, weapons trafficking conspiracy, and a dozen other charges. The judge's final words carried through the courtroom with the weight of history. You were given authority to protect this nation. Instead, you used that authority to profit from its vulnerabilities. You betrayed every person who served under you. Every family who trusted that their loved ones died for something meaningful. The sentence I impose today is inadequate to the harm you caused, but it ensures you will spend every remaining day of your life in a place where your crimes cannot be forgotten or forgiven. Vaughn showed no emotion, just stood there like a man carved from stone. Then they led him away in chains to a cell he would never leave. Alexis closed the laptop. It was done. The network dismantled. The guilty punished. The truth exposed. Her father's mission complete. She finished her coffee and walked out into Portland sunshine. The city moved around her with the rhythm of life continuing. People going to work, students heading to class, parents pushing strollers, all of them living in a world that was slightly more just than it had been 7 years ago. Because one woman had refused to accept that her father died for nothing. Because she had spent 7 years gathering evidence in the shadows. Because when the moment came, she had been willing to risk everything to ensure the truth survived. That night, Alexis dreamed about Damascus for the first time in months. But this time, the dream was different. This time, when her team fell, they did not stay down. They stood up, brushed themselves off, looked at her with expressions that said they understood what she had done. Her team leader saluted her. Mission complete, Blackwood. You brought us home. She woke with tears on her face. But they were not tears of grief. They were something else. Something that felt almost like peace. The war was over. The ghost could rest. And Alexis Blackwood could finally live the life her father had died trying to protect. A life where truth mattered, where justice was possible, where the courage of one person could change the trajectory of history. She got up and made coffee and sat at her window, watching dawn break over a city that did not know her story, did not need to know it, could simply exist alongside her as she figured out who Alexis Blackwood was when she was not fighting demons from the past. It would take time. Healing always did. But she had time now. Had a future that stretched ahead without the weight of unfinished business pressing down on every moment. Her father's journal sat on her desk. She picked it up and flipped to the last entry, the one written 3 days before his death. Truth is a weapon that cannot be confiscated. It waits, patient, inevitable. And when the moment is right, it strikes with a precision that no amount of power or money can defend against. I pray that if I fall, someone will pick up this weapon and finish what I started. Someone brave enough to fight for what is right, even when the cost is terrible. Someone who understands that some battles are worth fighting, even if victory seems impossible. Alexis closed the journal and whispered to the empty room. I picked up the weapon, Dad, and I finished the fight. Rest now. You earned it. She placed the journal on a shelf, not hidden, not buried, just there, a reminder of where she came from and what she had accomplished. Then she turned to face the window and the sunrise and the future that was finally truly hers. The ghost was gone. The soldier had fought her last battle, and Alexis Blackwood was finally free to discover who she was when she was not at war. It was, she thought, a gift worth 7 years of darkness to receive. The sun climbed higher, a new day beginning. And in Portland and Arlington and everywhere in between, the world continued its ancient dance of chaos and order and the eternal struggle between those who would hide the truth and those who would expose it. Today, at least, the truth had won. Tomorrow would bring its own battles. But that was tomorrow's problem. Today was for peace, for coffee, for sunshine, for being alive in a world that had tried very hard to make sure she was not. Alexis smiled and got to work. There was a life to build, and she was done wasting time.